rules that prevent premature death, asthma attacks, and other respiratory diseases, and fundamentally alter the Clean Air Act. I find that inexcusable, both on the substance and the process. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Kentucky.
How much time do I have remaining?
Gentleman has 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Is that okay? Okay. Okay. I was going to let this gentleman close, but 30 seconds is not enough. I would just say that the two gases I was trying to think of are hydrogen chloride and hydrogen fluoride. Those are the real problems in this utility act, the lack of technology, the unachievability of the standards, and that's why we're asking, this amendment's asking that the implementation be delayed for 3 years of this air transport rule. And with that, I would urge members to support my amendment. And I yield back, balance my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Kentucky. Those in favor will signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. And the amendment is agreed to.
I ask for a vote of the yeas and nays, a roll call vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Kentucky will be postponed. It is now in order to consider amendment number 11, printed in House Report 112-213. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 11, printed in House Report number 112-213, offered by Mr. Latta of Ohio.
Pursuant to House Resolution 406, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Latta, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to urge my colleagues to support my amendment to H.R. 2401. This amendment should be one of the most non-controversial EPA-related votes this House has faced in quite a while because it doesn't repeal any EPA rules or regulations. It doesn't block the EPA from doing anything. It simply requires the EPA administrator to consider the implementation costs and feasibility of compliance when setting national ambient air quality standards. We all want clean air. The Clean Air Act requires the EPA to review these standards in 5-year intervals and make revisions or set new standards if appropriate. Under current law, the EPA administrator is forbidden from taking the economic consequences of these rules under consideration when setting these standards, which means every 5 years the EPA is required to create new regulations, but does not have the legal authority to consider how they will affect the economy. This approach to regulation is a contributing factor to why unemployment numbers refuse to budge in many parts of our country, and we have millions of Americans still looking for jobs. Last year, the EPA decided to voluntarily review the national ambient air quality standards for ozone, despite being a full 3 years away from the review of the Clean Air Act requirements in 2013. The standards they discussed would have had a devastating effect on my home state of Ohio, putting every one of the 33 counties monitored into a state of non-attainment status, as well as over 85% of the other counties monitored nationwide. States and localities in non-attainment are required to meet expensive and complex regulatory requirements, more stringent permitting requirements, and comply with a number of other anti-growth measures. Fortunately, President Obama realized the urgency of this situation and asked the EPA not to propose a more stringent standard. Perhaps if the EPA administrator had considered the cost and feasibility of the tighter standard, we would have avoided the situation entirely. Now, with this amendment, we have the opportunity to make sure it doesn't happen in the future. I sent the President a letter commending his decision and requesting his support of the amendment and helping to get it passed both here in the House and in the Senate. Now I'm requesting your support. This is not a Republican idea or a Democrat idea. Considering the economy and the well-being of the unemployed Americans who are looking for jobs, it is the right thing to do. I urge support of the amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. For the purpose of the gentleman from California rise.
I rise in opposition to this amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise not just in opposition, but strong opposition to this amendment. The bill, as reported by the Energy and Commerce Committee, is a bad bill for air quality and public health. But this bill appears doomed to get even worse as we continue to amend it on the floor. If the latter amendment were adopted, it would eviscerate a cornerstone of the Clean Air Act without a single committee hearing to discuss the implications of this action. And that's nothing short of reckless policymaking. The Clean Air Act requires EPA to set national ambient air quality standards based on the science of how air pollution affects health and the environment. EPA scientists and an independent scientific advisory committee then recommend the health-based standards that is peer-reviewed, and they look at the impact of air pollution on health overall, and then on sensitive groups, such as children and the elderly, because we don't want a society where the sensitive people, like the children and the elderly, can't live with the rest of us. These national air quality standards essentially identify the level of ambient air pollution that's safe for people to breathe. With these health-based standards as the goalposts, states develop plans to control pollution and meet these goals. Cost is front and center in this planning. States can identify which pollution control measures are most cost-effective and rule out measures that produce more costs than benefits. The latter amendment turns this whole approach upside down. The amendment would require EPA to consider industry costs up front when determining what level of air pollution is safe for human health. That's like a doctor basing your diagnosis on the cost of the treatment. If the treatment is expensive, the doctor would tell you that you are healthy. For a doctor, that would be malpractice. It's no different here. The latter amendment will allow polluters to override scientists and require EPA to set air quality standards based on profits rather than the public health. The scientific determination of what is safe to breathe doesn't depend on the cost of cleaning up the pollution. My Republican colleagues throughout the debate on this bill have been happy to come to the floor and talk about the tremendous progress in reducing air pollution in this country. That's true, but it doesn't mean we have no longer a need for the tools that got us here, and that job is already done. We've made progress because Congress enacted a strong and effective Clean Air Act. If we weaken the law, air quality will suffer. And anyone who thinks clean air is enough, or the air is already clean enough, isn't thinking about the kids that can't play outside on a summer day without risking a potentially life-threatening asthma attack. For 40 years, and we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Clean Air Act, the essential basis of the law is to set health-based standards as our goals. Despite the progress we've made, that job isn't done on air pollution. But the latter amendment, if it becomes law, would reverse decades of progress in cleaning up the smog and soot pollution that triggers asthma attacks, heart attacks, other respiratory diseases, and the mercury pollution that causes brain damage and learning disabilities in children. It's preposterous that we have only 10 minutes to debate this fundamental change to the Clean Air Act that would upend 40 years of progress. I urge my colleagues to vote this amendment down based on its impact on public health as well as the mockery it makes of the legislative process, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentleman from California the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise on this amendment in support of the underlying TRAIN Act. The TRAIN Act is a bipartisan plan to analyze cumulative economic impacts of EPA regulations to better understand how these policies affect American manufacturing, energy prices, and private industry's ability to create jobs. The question that Americans want to know is, why are our jobs leaving? Why aren't we making things? And this bill will help us to define that. And here today in support of the TRAIN Act are Jennifer Frazier and Jeff Rose, up here in the gallery from Vantage Data Centers, a next-gen data center, and a small business from my home state of California. This has become an industry leader in performance efficiency and environmental stewardship. Since its inception in 2010, Vantage has sought to minimize electricity consumption at their data centers as electricity is far and away their greatest cost. The price of electricity has caused many companies in their industry to flee to other countries with a more welcoming business climate and cheaper electricity prices. Despite this existing competitive disadvantage for the United States, the EPA proposes new utility max standards will raise electricity prices and will have an adverse effect on even the environmentally friendly data center like Vantage and force more jobs overseas. The EPA has proposed regulation after regulation that would stifle job creation, hurt American economic competitiveness abroad, and increase energy prices on families already strained by the tough economy. The House Republican jobs agenda focuses on removing these barriers to job creation and includes necessary reforms like the TRAIN Act. The support of job creators like the National Association of Manufacturers, the Association of Builders and Contractors, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and Small Business Entrepreneurship Council further proves the need for the TRAIN Act to ensure that the administration does not continue to hamper the economic recovery and job creation of private industry. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The Chair would remind all members not to refer to occupants of the gallery. For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
5 minutes left on each side.
He has 1 minute remaining.
The gentleman has 1 minute remaining.
And how much on the other side?
30 seconds.
Mr. Latta has 30 seconds remaining.
Okay. Well, I urge my colleagues to vote against this Latta amendment. This is a radical, extreme amendment that reverses the Clean Air Act, which was signed by President Nixon, has been enforced by Democratic and Republican administrations, voted almost unanimously on a bipartisan basis in the House and the Senate, and it would strip away the goalposts of achieving health-based standards. I think to have only 10 minutes to debate on this extreme proposal is an affront to the legislative process. I urge my colleagues to vote no.
Does the gentleman yield back?
Yes.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, I urge passage of this amendment. When we're all back in our districts in August, I went to 18 different plants and facilities in my district, and the #1 issue out there with creating jobs was EPA regulations. EPA, that's all I heard. EPA, EPA, EPA. We're not going to move this country forward unless we get these regulations under control, and it's about time that they start looking at what they have to do to make sure that, under this amendment, to make sure that we've got things back on course. I mentioned this yesterday in committee that we've lost 180,000 manufacturing jobs alone in the Energy and Commerce Committee since earlier this year. We've got to get this economy moving. Thanks, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Ohio. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from California. Gentleman from Ohio asked for a recorded vote. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Ohio will be postponed.
I need help with a yes on it.
It's now in order to consider Amendment Number 12, printed in House Report 112-213. For what purpose does the gentlelady from California rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 12, printed in House Report number 112-213, offered by Ms. Richardson of California.
Pursuant to House Resolution 406, the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Richardson, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California.
Mr. Chairman, my amendment is intended to strike the provision that reduces the amount of funding to implement the diesel emission reduction program. 5 years ago, Congress passed the Diesel Emission Reduction Act as a part of the Energy Policy Act of 2005. The program was authorized at $200 million per year for 5 years. In 2011, the Congress acted responsibly, and in light of our fiscal crisis situation, we reduced that amount by $100 million per year. This amendment brings into question whether it makes sense to reduce a proven successful program that is not increasing regulations, as my former colleague just mentioned, but in fact it's helping companies to be able to meet those regulations in a cost-effective way. DERA has helped fund more than 360 retrofit projects to date, which has reduced well over 1.6 million tons of emissions and provided more than $4 billion in public health benefits, while employing thousands of workers who manufacture, sell, and repair diesel vehicles and their components in each of our states. Recognizing today's budgetary challenges, industry, environmental, and public sector representatives support the return of full year 2008 funding levels for DERA, or $50 million for 2012. The United States relies upon diesel power to transport commuters, tourists, and students, harvest our crops, build infrastructure, and move our freight. New clean diesel technology is reaching near zero emissions, but fleet turnover will take us many more years to come. Emissions from older diesel vehicles and equipment can be reduced, and we can help to make that happen. Some of our program results have been 119 projects affecting more than 14,000 diesel-powered vehicles and equipment, new state clean diesel grant programs in over 50 states, 2,200 tons of particulate matter emissions reduced, 580 million benefits to health, and this is a very important one, 3.2 million gallons of fuel that has been saved per year by implementing this program. So this is why in the last Congress I introduced legislation that extended DERA for 5 more years. The legislation received bipartisan support on both sides of the aisle and was signed by the President. In February, during a debate on H.R. 1, there was an amendment put forward by a representative on the other side of the aisle that would have eliminated full funding for DERA. The amendment in the continuing resolution at that time was soundly defeated by both of us, both sides of the aisle, 352 members. In fact, the chairman on the Interior, Environment, and Related Agencies Appropriations Subcommittee, Mr. Simpson, called the cuts to DERA, and I'm talking about my colleague from the other side, the wrong choice. I'm here to present that this cut is still the wrong choice. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves. For what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this amendment.
The gentleman qualifies. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I believe that Ms. Richardson, the gentlelady from California's amendment is heartfelt and sincere to the DERA program, but irresponsible as it's produced here today. There are costs associated with the EPA going forward with the studies that we are requesting of them. So under our rules of the House, there's pay-go rules. We must offset those costs. This is one of those tough decisions made to offset the cost. So the first line of irresponsibility would be it will add to the deficit, but for this offset. The second line of irresponsibility would be, well, it may feel responsible, and this really is a poison pill. Because if the offset is eliminated, they get to kill the whole bill because of that. So it's not as innocent in an amendment as it is portrayed and on the surface. The real issue of this bill in entirety must stand. As previous speakers have said, Mr. Speaker, and rightfully so, the EPA is a rogue agency. They are producing rules in a fast and furious manner that greatly affect this nation's ability to generate electricity. This bill just wraps 3 of them together and says, take a step back, do a cost analysis as the President has asked of agencies. This agency, though, as headed by Ms. Jackson, has said to us in our committee that she will not be beholding or follow the President's own executive order to look at the costs, the cost-benefit analysis. They say, as we've heard here today, their modeling says that they can reduce asthma, so therefore no cost-benefit analysis. But there are real effects that I'm concerned with here, and the reason why I do believe this needs to be studied before implemented. We need to slow down the EPA and Lisa Jackson in their attempt to do a cap program without Congress's involvement or approval. They couldn't get it done legislatively, so she's doing it by rule and edict from the EPA. This rule will add significant costs to the ability of small generators to generate electricity, which will force them to shut down without any path forward to replace that. In fact, they haven't even done a study on reliability to determine if electricity can be wheeled into the areas that the plants will have to shut down. In fact, there's two plants near my district in Nebraska, Grand Island and Fremont. Grand Island saying that these rules that the EPA are fast and furious and without any cost-benefit analysis will force the Grand Island plant to close. How will they get their electricity? They will have to find a creative way to do it, but yet there's been no study on reliability. Secondly, Fremont, Nebraska, they say what they'll do is just lower their plant level, just do a minimum amount of electricity. Where are they going to make that up? This is a direct hit. This is part of the radical environmentalist agenda being placed on America by one agency and one person, Lisa Jackson. We need to slow this down, take a hard look at it. Mr. Chairman, do you want me to reserve any time? I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from California is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I find it interesting that the gentleman would say that this might be irresponsible. What I heard of the comments was, I didn't talk about the legislation within itself. We're talking about the amendment of how this is going to be paid for. And so the question before the House is going to be, is it appropriate to take additional funds to use DERA as the whipping boy time and time again for a very program that is helping what my colleagues from the other side is saying? I would actually say that DERA is responsible. What's irresponsible is continuing to put the health of Americans in jeopardy. I will repeat the quote from my colleagues, the chairman of the Interior, Environment, and Related Agencies, Mr. Simpson. He called the cuts to DERA the wrong choice. We have already been responsible, and DERA has already paid its fair share in its being cut as other programs have been cut. The question is it right to continue to deplete this program? I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves. What purpose does the gentleman from Nebraska rise?
Mr. Speaker, or Chairman, I think it's interesting that she didn't refute the point that if the pay-go is eliminated, hers passes, they raise a point of order and kill the bill, which is the real impetus behind this amendment. So I also think I think it's also interesting, you have the right to close, that it's also interesting that the President's budget, for which there was no pushback by the other side of the aisle, zeroed it out. Ours didn't. We're just cutting it by $4 million, and it's a tough choice. We agree. Yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentlelady from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I would say, I think I've said twice now, the issue that we have before us is the question of this amendment is whether DERA is the appropriate funding source that would be considered for the offset. That's the question that we have before us. It's interesting that Mr. Whitfield himself has benefited from this program. In Kentucky, the construction ports utilize $1.16 million to retrofit 73 pieces of non-road construction equipment. Also, the Kentucky Association General Contractors benefited of retrofitting 87 pieces of equipment. I would say to you, it's irresponsible to have the American public driving on our highways and roads, going through our airports, breathing this air. I would like, what I've reached out to the other side, is that it's important. We're talking about EPA regulations. Why would we reduce funding of a program that helps companies to meet the regulations? It's counterintuitive and it doesn't make sense. I urge my colleagues to vote yes for the Richardson Amendment, and the Richardson Amendment is tended for exactly that, to eliminate cutting this program.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from California. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentlelady from California.
Ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from California will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments printed in House Report 112-213 on which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. Amendment number 1, offered by Mr. Welch of Vermont. Amendment number 2, offered by Mr. McNerney from California. Amendment number 3, offered by Ms. Moore of Wisconsin. Amendment number 4, offered by Ms. Capps of California. Amendment number 5, offered by Mr. Kinzinger of Illinois. Amendment number 6, offered by Mr. Dent of Pennsylvania. Amendment number 7, offered by Mr. Hastings of Florida. Amendment number 8, offered by Mr. Connolly of Virginia. Amendment number 9, offered by Ms. Jackson Lee of Texas. Amendment number 10, offered by Mr. Whitfield of Kentucky. Amendment number 11, offered by Mr. Latta of Ohio. Amendment number 12, offered by Ms. Richardson of California. The chair will reduce to 2 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote after the first vote in this series. The unfinished business is on the request for a recorded vote on Amendment number 1, printed in House Report 112-213 by the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welch, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 1, printed in House Report number 112-213, offered by Mr. Welch of Vermont.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
The House is voting on amendments to a bill that would create a committee to review EPA regulations with the intent to eliminate a number of regulations. A series of 14 votes here, 12 amendments, a procedural vote, and a vote on final passage expected early this afternoon. And that should wrap up legislative work for the House today. Members plan to leave for a one-week recess. House Speaker John Boehner and Majority Leader Eric Cantor are right now in the House gallery offering remarks on temporary government funding, which is set to expire on next Friday as the House prepares to start that week-long recess. This began just a moment ago.
We stop helping these people. I'm going to ask everyone to please help. They can't wait 5 days. As we speak right now, as we are here in this beautiful building, the people back home are running generators. They have boots on up to their waist as they struggle to put their life back together. We need help, and we need it now.
Good morning. My name is Tom Marino. I'm a congressman from the 10th Congressional District in Pennsylvania. And for the last 2 weeks, my staff and I have been in the mud and in the hip-high water and observing and actually participating in helping people to try and get their lives in order. This is unconscionable what Mr. Reed is attempting to do, playing politics at a time when people in my district, in Mr. Barletta's district, and other districts up and down the East Coast have nothing. I had an 8-year-old little girl say to me, "I don't have my bed anymore. And we don't have a bedroom for my sister and I to sleep in anymore because the flood destroyed our house." I had to try and calm children down that couldn't get into their house and were sitting in and on top of the roofs of cars and on flatbed trucks because of the water, crying and wondering what's going to happen to us. I was in a flood when I was younger, when I was a kid, and I know the devastation. I've had men, 50-year-old men, looking me in the eyeball and crying and saying, "I don't have any place to put my family. I have 4 children and a wife. Business owners saying my business in my house was completely wiped out. Senior citizens that we had to take medication to by boat. These people have nothing. The federal government has a responsibility to protect its citizens from terrorists and from natural disasters. And the most important issue now is getting the money to the states and to the locals so these people can get a hand up. They don't want a hand out. They just want a level playing field with their own tax dollars where the money is there. It's sitting there. This is not about Republican, Democrat. These are about Americans, people that I live with, people that I see on a daily basis. It's our responsibility. I made the promise. We're going to follow through with that promise. And there's absolutely no reason, absolutely none whatsoever, why the Senate should withhold up of introducing this bill. It's a good bill. The money's there. And we need to get this money to the people today. Not next week. Not why we argue about what's going to happen. Today. I'm going to go back and continue to tell my people what's going on here in Washington. Tell them to pay attention. And they are. But we have an obligation and we need to fulfill it right now. Thank you.
Take a couple questions.
Mr. Barletta, you voted against this CR on Wednesday saying there was not enough disaster relief. You said you supported the Senate version of disaster relief. Yet you voted for it last night, but there's no increase in disaster relief. What type of assurances have you gotten from Mr. Boehner and Mr. Cantor that you will get these funds, and why would you have such an abrupt change?
Well, when I came back from my district in northeastern Pennsylvania, I promised the people there that I would get them as much help as I possibly could, and I tried and I did everything that I can. I did speak with Speaker Boehner and Leader Cantor about the problems and how we need to get help. But when it comes down to the choice of shutting our government down and cutting off the funding, both Speaker Boehner and Leader Cantor assured me that the folks back home in northeastern Pennsylvania will get the assistance that they need, that we will not let them down. They will have what they need to put their life together. To think that at any time we would choose to stop any help to them is something that I would not believe could happen here in America.
Mr. Speaker, are you and Harry Reid going to try to work this out, or are we just going to see brinksmanship today, right now, on the Senate floor and on Monday?
I had a conversation with the Senate Majority Leader before I came down. There wasn't much progress made.
Mr. Speaker, you voted on a train act this afternoon. Are you sending your members home after that?
I don't deal with the schedule, but the Majority Leader does.
The intention for us is to complete the Train Act and to finish business of the day. That is correct. Again, the point is this. I mean, there's no brinksmanship. Harry Reid is holding a bill up with full funding of what is needed right now for no reason. No reason but for politics. Again, this is why the people just don't have the respect for this institution and this town anymore. You heard the stories. People need the money. The money's in the bill. The emergency disaster request from the President is funded, and then sometimes too. And so there's no reason that Harry Reid is holding this up other than politics. Let's get on with it, get the people their money.
Mr. Speaker, Harry Reid said that he's ready to bring the Senate back next week to try to work out, in his words, a bipartisan compromise to figure this out that everyone can agree on.
The House last night passed a bipartisan compromise that has the fingerprints of his office and the appropriators on both sides of the Capitol, my office, the Senate Minority Leader. It is a bipartisan bill that we sent over there. It is a reasonable, responsible approach to keep our government funded and to provide FEMA with the disaster relief money that is so badly needed by thousands of families.
So is it take it or leave it, Mr. Speaker?
Harry Reid could argue also that his bill is also bipartisan and the country board that also has support most funding.
There was no discussion with anyone on our side of the Capitol about the ad hoc approach that he decided to take at some point last week. Thank you all.
House Republicans talking about the congressional agenda and temporary government funding lawmakers have been working on, including disaster aid. Temporary funding is set to expire next Friday. Right now, the Senate is voting on a procedural motion related to the House passed bill as the House prepares to start that week-long recess. It was a late night in the House last night. Members worked on temporary government spending. Joining us is Stephen Dennis of Roll Call to talk about it. Mr. Dennis, you with us?
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Well, on the second try, the House did pass the stopgap spending bill. It happened early this morning. What's likely to happen with the bill in the Senate?
Well, they're voting right now to basically kill it and start over. The House Democrats have objected to two things. One, they want more funding for disaster relief, not just funding for the next few months. And they also want to get rid of the offset spending cuts to pay for it. There's about a $1.1 billion spending cut, and that goes to things like making cars more fuel efficient and to green energy projects like the one that failed in Solyndra, which is sort of a big hullabaloo here over Solyndra, given that costs $500 million in taxpayer dollars. And you have Democrats here sort of digging in and saying, hey, we don't think that we should be playing games with disaster funding. We should fully fund it and do it right now and not tie it to some spending cuts that Democrats contend will actually cost jobs.
What's Senate Majority Leader Reid saying about when the vote might actually occur?
Well, they're actually voting right now. They're probably two-thirds of the way through the vote. Looks like it's going to be defeated, the House bill, and that sort of means they'll then have to work with Republicans and try to avert a shutdown. But right now, it doesn't look like there's been a lot of success. The Speaker and Reid haven't really been on the same page at all on this. And the irony is they have a week to get this done before there's a government shutdown. But FEMA, the disaster relief agency, supposedly runs out of money on Tuesday. So it could be a long weekend here if they don't reach some kind of a compromise or accommodation.
So on the question of adding the Senate-passed $7 billion disaster aid package, where do Republicans stand on that?
Well, Republicans, there have been 10 Republicans that voted for that package and sent it over to the House. Some of them have since said that they would prefer the House bill with the offsets, et cetera. But, it's a dicey situation for a lot of these Republicans who have disasters in their states. Senators like Roy Blunt in Missouri, he had the terrible disaster at Joplin. It's not going to be a good thing for them if come Tuesday work is stopped all across the country. Apparently there's something like 48 states that have some kind of disaster declared in them in the past year. It's never a good. This whole episode is sort of one more example of how difficult it's been to get anything done in Congress this year with divided government. The fight is really right now over $1 billion or $2 billion, and yet it at least has the potential. It's very unlikely that they would actually shut down the government over this next week, but there's at least the potential for that to happen unless they, at some point they're going to have to come together and deal with each other. And one thing that's been interesting is just how few conversations it seems have been taking place between the top leaders in both parties. Apparently there was a conversation a few minutes ago, but it's the country's business keeps getting stalled because they can't get together.
Well, assuming that the Senate does reject the CR, then what happens next?
I think they all go back to a back room and wait until one side cries uncle. Or, maybe somebody comes up with a, compromise that can pass both houses. But, there's no guarantee that we're not going to see the sort of schoolyard tactics of, well, I'm going to go home first, and you guys, it's up to you guys to take the blame for this not getting done. You know, the House could conceivably, you know, go home today and say, hey, you know, Senate, pass that bill that you just defeated. The Senate could say, hey, you already have a bill, and we're ready to work all through next week through our recess to get the job done. So, you know, there might be a lot of grandstanding on this, but at some point they're going to have to get into a room and either hash something out, or the Senate Democrats are going to have to basically eat this bill. And so far, at least, they seem to be holding the line against it.
Stephen Dennis, thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time today.
It's great to be here.
And the House, again, voting on amendments to a bill that would create a committee to review EPA regulations with the intent to eliminate a number of regulations, a series of 14 votes here. Well, while this vote is underway, earlier today, President Obama talked about reforms to the No Child Left Behind program. Included in those reforms, the Education Department will waive certain requirements for states if they pledge to adopt some policy changes that the administration supports. The President spoke for about 15 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Everybody, please have a seat. Well, welcome to the White House, everybody. I see a whole bunch of people who are interested in education, and we are grateful for all the work that you do each and every day. I want to recognize the person to my right, somebody who I think will end up being considered one of the finest secretaries of education we've ever had, Arne Duncan. In addition to his passion, probably the finest basketball player ever in the cabinet. I also want to thank Governor Bill Haslam of Tennessee for taking the time to be here today and the great work that he's doing in Tennessee. I'm especially appreciative because I found out that his daughter is getting married and he is doing the ceremony tomorrow, so we've got to get him back on time. But we really appreciate his presence. Thank you. And a good friend, somebody who I had the pleasure of serving with during the time that I was in the United States Senate. He's now the governor of Rhode Island, Lincoln Chafee. It's wonderful to see Lincoln. Thank you all for coming. And I do want to acknowledge two guys who've just worked tirelessly on behalf of education issues who happen to be in the front row here. From the House, outstanding Congressman George Miller. And from the Senate, the pride of Iowa, Tom Harkin. Now, it is an undeniable fact that countries who out-educate us today are going to out-compete us tomorrow. But today, students are sliding against their peers around the globe. Today, our kids trail too many other countries in math, in science, in reading. And that's true, by the way, not just in inner-city schools, not just among poor kids, even among what are considered our better-off suburban schools. We're lagging behind where we need to be. Today, as many as a quarter of our students aren't finishing high school. We have fallen to 16th in the proportion of young people with a college degree, even though we know that 60% of new jobs in the coming decade will require more than a high school diploma. And what this means is, if we're serious about building an economy that lasts, an economy in which hard work pays off, with the opportunity for solid middle-class jobs, we've got to get serious about education. We are going to have to pick up our games and raise our standards. We're in the midst of an ongoing, enormous economic challenge. And I spend a lot of my time thinking immediately about how we can put folks back to work and how we can stabilize the world financial markets. And those things are all important. But the economic challenges we face now are economic challenges that have been building for decades now. And the most important thing we can do is to make sure that our kids are prepared for this new economy. That's the single most important thing we can do. So even as we focus on the near term and what we've got to do to put folks back to work, we've got to be thinking a little bit ahead and start making the tough decisions now to make sure that our schools are working the way they need to work. Now, we all know that schools can't do it alone. As parents, the task begins at home. It begins by turning off the TV and helping with homework and encouraging a love of learning from the very start of our children's lives. And I'm speaking from experience now. Malia and Sasha would often rather be watching American Idol or SpongeBob. But Michelle and I know that our first job, our first responsibility is instilling a sense of learning, a sense of a love of learning in our kids. And so there are no shortcuts there. We have to do that job, and we can't just blame teachers and schools if we're not instilling that commitment, that dedication to learning in our kids. But as a nation, we also have an obligation to make sure that all of our children have the resources they need to learn, because they're spending a lot of time outside of the household. They're spending the bulk of their waking hours in school. And that means that we've got to make sure we've got quality schools, good teachers, the latest textbooks, the right technology. And that, by the way, is something we can do about right away. That's why I sent the jobs bill to Congress that would put thousands of teachers back to work all across the country and modernize at least 35,000 schools. Congress should pass that bill right now. We've got too many schools that are under-resourced. Too many teachers who want to be in the classroom who aren't because of budget constraints, not because they can't do the job. So parents have a role, and schools need more resources. But money alone won't solve our education problems. I've said this before. I will repeat it. Money alone is not enough. We also need reform. We've got to make sure that every classroom is a place of high expectations and high performance. And that's been our vision since taking office. That's why instead of just pouring money into the system that's not working, we launched a competition called Race to the Top. And to all 50 states, to governors, to school districts, we said, show us the most innovative plans to improve teacher quality and student achievement. We'll show you the money. We want to provide you more resources, but there's also got to be a commitment on your part to make the changes that are necessary so that we can see actual results. And for less than 1% of what we spend on education each year, Race to the Top, under Arnie's leadership, has led states across the country to raise their standards for teaching and learning. And by the way, these standards that we're talking about, these high standards that we're talking about, were not developed here in Washington. They were developed by Republican and Democratic governors throughout the country. Essentially, you had a peer group, a peer review system where everybody traded best practices and said, here's what seems to work, and let's hold all of our schools to these high standards. And since that's Race to the Top's been launched, we've seen what's possible when reform isn't just a top-down mandate, but the work of local teachers and principals and school boards and communities working together to develop better standards. Now, this is why in my State of the Union address this year, I said that Congress should reform the No Child Left Behind law based on the principles that have guided Race to the Top. And I want to say, the goals behind No Child Left Behind were admirable. And President Bush deserves credit for that. Higher standards are the right goal. Accountability is the right goal. Closing the achievement gap is the right goal. And we've got to stay focused on those goals. But experience has taught us that in its implementation, No Child Left Behind had some serious flaws that are hurting our children instead of helping them. Teachers too often are being forced to teach to the test. Subjects like history and science have been squeezed out. And
The President earlier today in the White House. Right now, the House is working on amendments to a bill looking to make changes to EPA regulations. A series of 14 votes here. Final passage expected this afternoon. The House yesterday approved temporary federal spending for the federal government late last night. That measure was sent to the Senate for approval, and as predicted by Majority Leader Harry Reid, the Senate rejected that measure today. The vote is still underway, but it appears the votes are not there. So weekend sessions in the Senate are possible. Funding for the government does run out next Friday.
On this vote, the yeas are 173, the nays are 236. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is on the request for a recorded vote on Amendment Number 2, printed in House Report 112-213 by the gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment Number 2, printed in House Report Number 112-213, offered by Mr. McNerney of California.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
So 2-minute voting is underway in the House as work continues with amendment votes on a bill looking to change EPA regulations. A series of 14 votes underway here with a vote on final passage coming up. This particular amendment brought by Congressman McNerney of California would require a review of the impact of the clean energy sector. The Associated Press reporting this hour that the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas today formally asked the UN to recognize a state of Palestine, which defies U.S. and Israeli opposition. The application for full UN member sidesteps nearly 2 decades of troubled negotiations and risks a threatened American veto.
228, and the amendment is not agreed.
Mr. Hanna.
Off
no on I for Mr. Hanna. Mr. Gutierrez. Mr. Gutierrez votes aye. Mr. Rohrabacher. Mr. Rohrabacher votes no.
Fitzpatrick.
Mr. Fitzpatrick. Off no on I for Mr. Fitzpatrick. B. Mr. Thompson of Mississippi votes aye. Mr. Hurt. Mr. Hurt votes no. Ms. Berkeley. Ms. Berkeley votes aye. Mr. Issa. Mr. Issa votes no.
On this vote, the yeas are 184, the nays are 229. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is on a request for recorded vote on Amendment Number 3, printed in House Report 112-213 by the gentlewoman from Wisconsin, Ms. Moore, on which further proceedings were postponed and by which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment Number 3, printed in House Report Number 112-213, offered by Ms. Moore of Wisconsin.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in favor of a recorded vote shall rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
So this is the third of 14 votes on changes to EPA regulations. 2-minute voting underway in the House as work continues with amendment votes on a bill looking to change EPA regulations. This amendment requires analysis of EPA regulations on low-income communities and public health. Well, a short time ago, we just heard